Hey there YouTube, and welcome to Big Mike Beard Wisdom. So today we're going to wind up talking about savings bonds, and it's basically because I kind of found one that I had, so this is all the way back from 1986. But what I'm going to recommend is that basically if you have any of these bonds, or you know maybe someone's holding these bonds for you, just take a look at them, evaluate them, and see what you need to do. For me, the savings bond was an EE savings bond. So it looked kind of similar to this. So let's just Google, searching for EE savings bonds, clicking on images. And you can see up in the corner it'll say EE on it. And then this has a lot of information on here. Normally there'll be your social... So there'll be like your social security number, your name and address, maybe another person. That way, you know, it's if in case someone else is an owner. And it'll have like the date that it was purchased on. And mine had a weird set of like punched holes on the side where like the person was on. A lot of savings bonds mature after 30 years. So once it hits 30 years, they stop accruing any additional interest. They stop gaining any money. And all of them are a little bit different with how it works. Even the EE series ones. So as time went, they kind of changed the rules on these. For this video, we're going to kind of focus on the series EE ones, because that's what I had. And also we're going to be thinking about the ones that are older, because the mature ones will be any of them that were sold in 1991 or earlier. Because this is 2021, so 30 years ago would be 1991. Before June 2003, the EE bonds were sold at half the face value. So instead of this one being a $50 one, if it was sold prior to June 2003, the face value shows $50, but you would have paid $25 for it, with the promise that the value would double in 20 years. So for me, the bond that I had was purchased in 1986. So the value of the bond would have doubled to $50, because it was a $50 face value bond, in 2006. Then, once 2006 hit, there's a rate that they continue to accrue interest until they hit about 30 years. So if you end up Googling almost anything with a savings bond, this TreasuryDirect website is going to be one of the first ones that Google takes you to. And I basically navigated in here to the before May 1995 for the EE bonds rates and terms. And they've got some cool stuff. So in here they have a bond calculator. Before I turned my bond in yesterday, I did do this calculator. And you're able to set the value as of what date, what series of bonds it is, the denomination, which I'm assuming is the face value, the bond serial number, and the issue date, and then it winds up giving you a value. And I really probably should have saved my info, that way I could have shown you guys how that worked. To keep talking about the bond values, there's some interesting things you have to look at. If you're going to turn in a bond early, this section here is kind of important, because it's when you should redeem, more or less, because it's when the bonds accrue interest. For me, obviously we went way past the 30-year mark, so essentially I didn't need to care about this. And I would recommend, based off of how this turned out, that if you've got them, I would also wait until the 30-year mark hits. And it has some further information in here. So what are the general rates and terms for these bonds? It basically breaks down that these were sold at half of the original face value, and that the bond actually started to earn interest on what it cost, not on its face value. So mine was a $50 face value bond. So someone paid $25 for this bond, and it actually wound up being worth $115.32 when I turned it in yesterday, which was after about 35 years. 5 years of that, it would not have accrued any more interest. It can get a little bit weird. So if you've got ones that are between January of 1980 through April of 1995, there's a different maturity date depending on when you purchased it. If you end up having an EE bond, I would definitely recommend visiting this site. That way you can kind of see where it's supposed to land. And especially if you have one that's already matured, so anything that's 1991 or older. And there really is a lot of good information on the TreasuryDirect site about savings bonds. Now, the big reason why I'm kind of talking about this is because inflation right now is kind of a big hot button topic. And especially with like the stimulus checks and stuff like that, a lot of people are kind of worried that inflation is going to really wind up taking off. So real quick, we'll look at like the value of a 1986 US dollar to today. And then this is just inflationtool.com. So if you Google inflation calculator, this is one of the first ones that pops up. And it's pretty simple, just put in the amount. So $25 for the original savings bond that they would have paid, starting year 1986, end year 2021. This is probably the best reflection for the amount of money that was paid for when I turned in my savings bond. So this isn't a really good reflection of when I, should have turned it in. So, but basically, you can see that for the $25 they spent in 1986, that $25 is now $59.63, 35 years later. But we got back $115.32. So that $25 grew quite a good bit. So it outran inflation pretty well. So just real quick, I popped on to Yahoo Finance and we're looking at the S&P 500, and I have this set for May 25th, 1986, because today is May 25th, 2021. And you can pretty much see that the stock market's kind of exploded since 1986. So the S&P 500, which is the 500 like top companies more or less in the US, under certain criteria that they fit into the S&P, is about $250, 200, maybe up to about just short of $300 back in 1986. Right now, it's at $4,195. So the S&P 500 really grew quite a good bit. But there's no guarantee that if someone would have invested in 1986, if they would have invested in a manner that would have gone all over the S&P 500 and grown like that. And then for the Dow Jones Industrial average, you can kind of see that back in 1986, it was down in like the 3,200, maybe up to about 3,500 range. But now it's 33,000. But let's look at Coke real quick, because Coke was around back then. So were a whole bunch of other ones, but I like Coke. So if we look, looks like Coke's paid dividends the entire time too. So you can kind of ignore this line. But with that dividends, it would also mean that you've accrued money for just holding the stock. So Coke back then was about, looks like about $2.50 through maybe close to $3 back in 1986. Now Coke is at $54.56. So this entire time you would have been getting paid a dividend for owning that stock. I couldn't get it to pull up on the Yahoo Financial because of what happened to Briggs and Stratton. But basically, Briggs and Stratton wound up going bankrupt. And they were actually a stock that I was watching for some time. Because they had a decent price and a fairly good climbing dividend. But it was one of those things where I never bought them, and it was, thank God I didn't. Well, that's not funny for anyone that had it as a retirement plan. But basically, if you would have bought Briggs and Stratton way back in like 1986, and then for this I had to go, like, in order to actually see this stock chart, for some reason I had to go to this barchart.com website. And so back here, back in like 1986-ish, it was about $649, $650 for the stock. It really took off on some of these. So this is about $35 there, $44 up here. So it did really well, but then it kind of started to slump down and then really got death nailed. Looks like the final price it's showing is 77 cents. So that $25 that would have been spent back in 1986 at $6 and some change a share would have been worth much less now. And then especially, there must be something that's going on with Briggs and Stratton. I'm not 100% sure if they've gone to like a private company, but it's really hard to find any kind of Briggs and Stratton information now on the internet. This Briggs and Stratton makes a really good example of like a warning for messing with the stock market. And then the one last thing that I would definitely check is whether or not you can turn it in at your bank. And I tried Googling it real quick, but then I wound up actually just calling my bank just to verify, because on the back of these, the one that I had said that it had to be signed in front of somebody, and then I think they even have to like stamp it or something like that said that, hey, this is the person, they signed it in front of me, this was definitely the person that owns the bond. And luckily, with where we're at now in May of 2021, some of the COVID restrictions are opening up, so I was able to actually go in the bank and turn one in. Where I'm pretty sure in earlier months it could have been something where maybe you weren't allowed to go in the bank, and maybe you might not have been able to do savings bonds at the time. All right, so far we've gone over. There's a whole bunch of weird personal information on your savings bond. So if someone steals it, they're gonna have some information that you may not want to be out there. We went over, waiting until it hits its maturity date and then fully grows with the interest. So if it's a EE bond, wait your 30 years if possible. We went over some of the weird stuff with EE bonds and how they can differ year to year. Kind of covered how it beat inflation. So inflation hit just a little bit past the full face value of when this one was $25. Inflation for that amount of money now, it's just a little bit past $50. But my savings bond was worth $115.32. Then we looked real quick on stocks just to kind of see that while savings bonds are pretty safe, probably, if you could pick a stock and hold it, it might be a little bit of a better choice in terms of return. Now, granted, you could have made a horrible choice with the stock and lost it all. And with the state of the world, you may or may not be able to turn these in. So you want to check with your financial institution and see if they take these. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to like and subscribe. And I'll check you guys next time. And we can even check the Dow real quick. Well, maybe not real quick. So, there goes so again. No counters this time. There goes the fan. There was a way to turn the fan off. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Oh, that fan's driving me nuts. Now to continue. So for the S&P 500, oh crap, I just screwed something up.